Hello, this is Freethought Forum, program produced and funded by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. I'm Ralph Eisler.
And I'm John Clark. We want you to know that if you don't believe in God, you are not alone. Right here in East Tennessee, you can find free-thinking atheists and agnostics. This is a show for them and for people committed to a life rooted in science and free of supernatural beliefs.
This is a call-in show. However, we only have one phone line, so if you can't get through, we invite you to tweet us at FFTVKnox, K-N-O-X. While we go over a few announcements, we invite you to start calling in now at the number on the screen. Get a pen and paper, and we'll give you our email address later in the show so you can also write in.
The Atheist Society of Knoxville frequently has a fun meetup at a bar or eatery. Tonight's meetup is at Barley's in the Old City, starting around 5:30. Look for the silver-jacketed copy of The God Delusion by Richard Dawkins standing upright on the table. And as Matt Dillahunty at the Atheist Experience says, everyone is welcome to our happy hour for food, drink, and conversation. But if you plan to preach, proselytize, provoke, or punch, please don't.
Okay, the Rationalists of East Tennessee have several regular monthly meetings. Third Sunday mornings are usually lectures with lively roundtable discussions. The book club meets on the second Sunday, and the Reflections group gets together for a potluck lunch on the fourth Sunday. Our February 10th book club will feature Quiet, The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking by Susan Cain Barnes. Boy, I'd like to make sure that I attend that one. On Sunday, April 21st, we'll show a recorded lecture titled 2,000 Years of Witch Hunting in the Western World by Yale professor Dr. John Demos. Visit our websites for additional details, including times and locations.
Today's topic is church attrition, continuing from last week and a trend of videos that we've started probably about the middle of last year. On one of the major concerns for mainline churches today is that people, especially young people, they're just not attending, they're leaving. The fastest growing group of people affiliated with churches are the nuns, and that is those who claim no affiliation at all. But before we discuss the reasons for the state of affairs, let us look at some items in the news.
Okay, well, starting 2 days from now, on March 28th, the American Atheists will hold their national convention in Austin, Texas, celebrating their 50th anniversary. Behind us on the screen is one of the posters they've been showing. It shows Mike Huckabee essentially wanting to get the American Constitution amended to conform with biblical morality. Behind us, as I say, is that poster. And it was in Austin a half-century ago that the organization was started by Madalyn Mary O'Hair. I was in graduate school at Baltimore when she filed her suit against the city to remove compulsory prayers from the classroom. I used to organize meetings for a student group in the physics department, and one evening I did get her ACLU attorney to give a talk. This was my first acquaintance with the ACLU, and I was, and still am, very impressed with the job they do to defend civil liberties.
Here's an item that might not surprise anyone from this area of the country. The American Bible Society, partnering with the Barna Group, has identified America's most Bible-minded cities based on the highest combined levels of regular Bible reading and belief in the Bible's accuracy. Guess which city came out on top? Knoxville, Tennessee. Chattanooga was also listed in the top 10. 9 of the top 10 were in the red state South.
Not surprising at all, is it?
No.
Okay, well, this coming Sunday is the most important day in Christendom. It's Easter, when Jesus was purported to have risen from the dead. But did this celebration really start with the Christians? It is the oldest Christian holiday, but how much of the most public and common celebrations of Easter today remain Christian in nature? Many people go to church far more than the rest of the year, but what else? Easter candy isn't Christian, the Easter bunny isn't Christian, Easter eggs aren't Christian, but that bunny up and back of me is sure painting one nice Easter egg.
Most of what people commonly associate with Easter is pagan in origin. The rest is commercial. Just as American culture secularized Christmas, it's secularizing Easter. Pagan roots of Easter lie in celebrating the spring equinox. For millennia, an important holiday in many religions. Celebrating the beginning of spring may be among the oldest holidays in human nature. occurring every year on March 20th, 21st, or 22nd. The spring equinox is the end of winter and the beginning of spring. Biologically and culturally, it represents for northern climates the end of a dead season and the rebirth of life, as well as the importance of fertility and reproduction.
Well, we might not think that's true this March.
Right.
A focus of spring religious festivals was a god whose own death and birth symbolized the death and rebirth of life during this time of year. Many pagan religions had gods who were depicted as dying and being reborn. In some legends, this god even descends into the underworld to challenge the forces there. Atheist, consort of the Phrygian fertility goddess Cybele, was more popular than most. In other cultures, he acquired different names, including Osiris, Orpheus, Dionysus, and Tammuz. I think if Jesus were around today, he might buy into the Easter egg thing.
Before we move on, I just want to note that just as around Christmas time we get these interesting festivities that occur and confusion of the holidays, really. You know, we get it with Easter. And O'Reilly has already warned us of the war on Easter. If you haven't been watching the lamestream or the not lamestream news of Fox News station, but it's awfully interesting how there's a war. It's always a war.
Yeah,
it's not. There's not a gray area to bring everyone to the table. It's a black and white issue.
Yeah.
I think it's mixed around here, and that we have lots of people that are very fundamental, and it is black and white for them. They might agree with Bill O'Reilly, but we also, it seems to me, in this area, have plenty of moderate Christians, moderate religious folks, who certainly don't see it that way, but might be influenced by this idea that there's this war, especially if certain religious actions on public property if there's some confusion there, during the Easter
time. I think most Christians I know, they're not extremists in any way at all. But there is a hardcore, like in Anderson County where I live, these 50 Baptist churches got together and they got the county commission to pass an ordinance saying they're going to put a God We Trust on all four sides of the county building in Clinton.
I grew up in that area. I went to high school there, so yeah, that's interesting. I also noticed that even among my moderately Christian friends, or Christian moderates, or however you want to talk about it, while Christmas might be, they're more likely to say that atheists or freethinkers have a problem with Christmas than they are to say atheist freethinkers have a problem with Easter. And I think a lot of that is due to the pressure that media groups, Bill O'Reilly and whatnot, have put. They've put tremendous amount of funding over the last several years to show you that there's a war on Christmas, and this is a manufactured war. And it appears that there's some tug to do this to Easter as well. Just food for thought. Think that over for a moment.
Yeah, I haven't heard him say anything about a war on Easter, but certainly they've pushed that war on Christmas for many years. He had Herb Silverman, the head of the American Atheist, on his show, talking about that, because they put up signs, basically countering his to make him think there's a war on Christmas, because they basically put up signs saying, well, it's a myth or something of that sort in there. Unfortunately, Bill's not too bright a guy. When he didn't know what caused the tides to go in and out. I think we discussed it. Well, anyhow, why don't we...
Yeah, let's continue on here. We can't leave out the news segment without noticing that UT students, or at least some of them, are organizing a Sex Week celebration to start on April the 5th. It's a mixture of educational and fun stuff, but of course anything dealing with sex gets some of our state representatives in an uproar, especially the Don't Say Gay guy Stacey Camfield and the monkey bill fellow Bill Dunn. The UT administration has been pressured into pulling about $11,000 out of the $18,000 cost. The students are trying to raise the necessary funds to keep the entire program intact. Send them a few dollars if you would like to keep free expression alive on campus. By the way, for those who adamantly maintain that homosexuality doesn't occur in nature, the picture behind us shows two female bonobos having sex, or bonobos having sex. It's rather common among these primates who are our closest living relatives. And
yeah.
oh wait, yeah, this side. Yeah.
What can I say? they go at it pretty hot and heavy most of the time.
Interesting. Also, I went to see. Forrest was there. Richard Dawkins in Charleston. This past, not this week, but the week before, weekend before, and yeah, we look at bonobos, and they're our closest living relatives. But just as a little tidbit, something I didn't know before, humans are very similar to each other genetically. We are in fact so similar that any two humans on the planet are more genetically similar than any two chimpanzees from separate sides of the same forest. And that's,
I had read that somewhere before.
Yeah. And so that points to a bottleneck in the population at some point. You know, a lot of them either died off, and I guess it's estimated that humanity came down to just a few thousand individuals, and then, of course, rose again. And well, that does kind of seem to congeal with archaeological evidence that we have.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, well, I guess it's time to get on with our main discussion of people leaving church, why they're leaving church, and why are so many people becoming nuns.
Right. You'll see we're continuing with last week's title there, God is Dead and No One Cares. Is it really that no one cares? They're indifferent, it seems. People are willing to criticize, and as we just talked about in the news with Easter, Christmas, you know, we've got the Proposition 8 in the news right now as well. It's important to distinguish criticism from mocking, and even a mocking criticism, try not to get offended right away. I mean, the first thing you should do is try to answer the argument, I think, and if you want, forgive them for the mocking tone, but I think that's what's going on. It's self-criticism within these individuals in the church. We live in a society that, you know, you get out of high school, you could easily be several states away, even if you're someone that didn't leave your own county, like me.
And I think that's one of the factors, that you no longer have these really close-knit families. And once kids get away, they have to start thinking more on their own. And whereas if they're at home, the pressure to conform and say go to the same church that they always went to, that's probably pretty strong within some families.
Yeah, I would say Anderson County, where I grew up, which we just talked about, you know, you knew everybody.
Yeah.
You really, and if somebody was, you know, questioning this or that, you tended to find out about it quite quickly. You could also prevent someone who is new to the town from interacting, especially if you're a parent, and you could kind of say, well, I don't want you hanging around. And so that probably happens less now. But really what I wanted to examine this show that we didn't so much examine last show is the interesting way that some Christian moderates are examining this problem. We had maybe several months ago, we had a show about William Lane Craig's apologetics, and he's trying to do the same thing. This is, you know, why are people leaving the church? And I feel that these people are being very honest with themselves, as honest as they can be, but they're rationalizing it almost like the same way a parent would rationalize a child leaving the home before they'd prefer it, or, you know, I'm not going to follow in your footsteps, I'm going to go to this school, it's my decision. And the parents are kind of like, well, this is the phase, right? This is something that will pass, and in many cases you're probably right, but they start to rationalize, and maybe they need one of their friends to butt in and go, no, this is why your kid took off, you know, because he's talking to my son. You know, and you get this very interesting rationalization that occurs in their minds.
Yeah, I think that I brought this up a few weeks ago on a show. It was mainly connected to politics, but it also seemed to go along with religion. Robert Perry, investigative reporter, he made a statement in column he wrote. He said the real struggle confronting the United States is between those who believe in reality and those who are entranced by unreality. That is, people who won't come to grips with what the actual problems are.
Exactly.
And they then come to rationalizing, as you say. And as I pointed out before the show when we were talking, the Republicans have done this by losing, when they lost the presidential election. You can see them now sort of floundering around and trying to find out exactly why they lost. And they keep making the excuse that it's the way it was packaged. It's not that the fundamental message was wrong.
Yeah.
So I guess we have a caller now, do we?
Yeah, we're going to go straight to the call here.
Caller.
Hello, caller. This is Freethought Forum. Could we have a nickname for you?
Yes. Red Leader.
Red Leaf?
No, Blue Leader.
Blue Leader?
Yes.
All right. Hello, Blue Leader. I'm John. Ralph's with me here. What do you got for us today?
Well, y'all were talking about Easter. I assume it's because Easter is coming up.
Right. It's just in the news a little bit here and there, you know.
Well, y'all were talking about the Easter parade?
No, we didn't talk about the Easter parade. Is there an Easter parade in Knoxville?
No. Well, according to cinema, the Easter parade is where all the young lasses get dressed up in their Sunday best and go to church on Easter morning.
Oh.
You know, with the Easter in or Easter bonnet.
Yeah.
And, you know, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think our mention of Easter was mainly, I kind of jokingly mentioned Bill O'Reilly when he...
His war on Easter?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, yes.
Yeah.
Well, maybe my call is inappropriate then.
No, your call's perfectly appropriate. I can remember from my youth when I did go to church that's when all the young girls got dressed up and looked very pretty.
Oh, yeah.
It was a huge thing that we did as well. So.
Yeah.
There's nothing sweeter than a young lass with those little white gloves and the little bonnet and the dress and everything. That's so cute. But that's not the Easter parade that God intended.
Uh-huh.
All right. Well, what do you think God intended for the Easter parade?
Zombies.
All right.
Well,
don't really know where to go from there, Blue Team Leader.
I don't watch any of those shows on TV, but anyhow, I'd be willing to go to one if you can point me the direction.
Well, I was just thinking that that's the Easter parade that is actually in the Bible.
Oh.
Oh.
If you'll recall,
yes,
there was those gospel verses from Matthew, where the dead saints arose out of the grave.
Right.
Oh,
and
right.
then, when Jesus was resurrected, like Sunday morning, these corpses gathered together and walked into town.
Huh. Well, I mean,
I'm imagining a whole bunch of corpses walking out of their graves into town, and that sounds like an Easter parade.
Yeah. Did they have bonnets on?
I do not know if people were buried with bonnets or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks very much. I think maybe somebody else should call in about that.
Well, I mean, that is what happened.
Yeah.
According to the Bible, that's what happened.
Yeah.
Oh, well, so wouldn't people who are wanting to emulate the Bible and Jesus do that sort of thing?
You know, I think part of emulating the Bible, I know there are exceptions to this, but you would take an event that's something a little bit more, something that people would be into. I mean, nowadays you could easily get a lot of people to dress up as zombies and do a 5K or something of that nature. So I suppose you could get people to do some interesting things at any point. but for its success rate, its survival value in the community, I imagine that is why it didn't linger in that manner. do you follow?
Are you telling me why the zombie parade did not survive the ages?
Well, I'm supposing a possibility.
I see.
Yeah.
Well, that's I hadn't thought of that.
I mean, just as an idea that might be better than others, perhaps it didn't take hold for those reasons, and I really can't comment. I know through this time period that the Catholic Church shifted back and forth on ways in which Christianity was spread or even enforced, and the survival value of certain characteristics of Christianity just fluctuated, if I'm not mistaken. I really don't know a lot about this.
Yeah.
Right.
I think we need Joe, maybe.
I put you down a no for the zombies?
Well,
Put me down as a...
I have done a zombie 5K before, but yeah, no.
I did not know that.
Yeah, so.
I did not know that. 5K, that's what...
3.2 miles.
Well, your math is better than mine.
Well, I just know the number. Not a matter of math today, but right. So, well, anyhow, we're going to press on real quick for the rest of the topics on the show.
Okay.
But we appreciate the call, and thanks for the information. Thanks for the
calling in. This was giving everybody in the audience something to think about, I will say.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Yeah, we'll remind you out there, this is a call-in show. Our number's up there on the screen. And particularly, any of you who may have dropped out of your church at one point or another and would like to talk to us a little bit about the reasons why you did it. We'd appreciate hearing that.
Or if you know somebody who dropped out and came back. We're mainly interested in why they left in the first place, and I think that's what the conversation's over. I would argue that they came back because people tend to come back to home, but anyhow.
Well, sometimes they come back once they have families and they feel they want to settle down a little bit, I think, and they want that social interaction. In fact, I think most people go to church for the social interaction as much as for anything else.
It's certainly a survival characteristic.
Yeah.
You know, another great reason to go.
Yeah, some of these churches, they're very closely knit. You know, like Seventh-day Adventist Church or the Jehovah's Witnesses. They tend to stay very closely knit, very close.
There are a couple members of our group that go down to Barley's that entertain the idea that this meeting once a week is almost our church, in the sense that you get this social atmosphere, and for them, especially because they came from the church, it's something that they value.
Yeah, I think we have another caller here. Hello, caller. You're on the line. Can you give us a name or a nickname?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Can you?
Excellent. This is Charles calling from Illinois.
Oh, from Illinois.
Yes. I've called in before. I've seen your show a bunch of times.
All right, great.
And I'm commenting on the traditions that you're talking about.
All right.
One of the things that I've read was a book called The Way We Never Were, which discusses how we have mythologized ourselves through mass media and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And particularly in the last 50 years, starting, say, around 1960 or so, the primary means of that was television and the movies. And a lot of the things that people deal with in the way of how they see the world was projected into them from these television movies. So the East parades and things of that nature were all, and many times, Hollywood makeups, concepts.
Right. This book, if I'm not mistaken, we're talking about like the image of the American family. You know, Leave It to Beaver, things like that. Is this what you're referring to, or?
Yes, but it also goes back in greater detail to
Okay.
like how we saw Daniel Boone and Davy Crockett and
right.
so forth.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's much larger than that.
Yeah, we are.
Today,
Yeah, we have a mass delusion about what that is. You know, the events involving the Native Americans. I mean, when I was growing up, I know the history was always.
I know what he means. He's, these things have been romanticized.
Yes,
you
yes.
know, to the way that we do have this background that is not necessarily a real background, but is a media developed background. That's what you're talking about, right?
yes, and so the concepts for Easter and so forth are also tied into that, because it was generated by the church as the way to help convert people, starting back like around, I guess, like the 800s and so forth.
Okay.
And so oftentimes what many people think of as established fact isn't.
Right.
Okay?
Right. Yeah.
There's no way you're going to be able to prove to a lot of these people that.
That's right, and of course historians have a very difficult time often establishing fact as you go back several hundred or several thousand years, especially
Yes.
when there are not written records. And
Right.
so you know there are hundreds of people all over the world who have in the last 3 centuries tried to do critical biblical analysis to find out about the real historical Jesus, for instance. And
Oh, and they run off a big problem, because the so-called real historical Jesus is the fact that we don't have anything that really is a contemporary account of him.
Right.
right, exactly. So that makes it
And-
very difficult. But it also makes it easy, though, for people who are trying to sell something to fabricate
Come
a
up with stuff,
formula.
because there's no way to counteract it
Yeah.
with established, verified sources.
Yeah,
Right,
it becomes
exactly.
amorphous, right? Or amorphous.
Amorphous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just.
Yeah, so it's a little hard to know how all these Easter traditions started, or really when they started, I guess.
Well, actually, there were adaptations of earlier pagan
Well, right.
practices.
But
The
it.
rabbit, the egg, and so forth.
Yeah,
Right.
well, we mentioned some of those at the beginning of the show. We didn't dwell on those because they weren't the primary topic. But since Easter was coming up, we really wanted to mention some
Yeah.
of those.
Yeah.
Now, one of the consequences of this bad history is a lot of people don't understand how what it takes for a treaty to become established. Like the Treaty of Tripoli
Right.
Yeah.
had to be passed by both the House and the Senate, which it did unanimously in both,
Yeah.
which included the phrase, "We are in no sense a Christian nation."
Right.
So,
And that was a
That's one-
that was a guarantee, if I'm not mistaken, to ensure our. Man, I'm really losing it. Yeah.
To the Bay of Tripoli.
Right. Yeah.
right,
Ensure our incentives or our
access to the Mediterranean.
right. Right.
Okay. But it was also passed unanimously by all the House and Senate, and was published in many of the newspapers at the time. And many of the people that had been at the Continental Congress that formulated the federal government were still alive.
Right.
And there was absolutely zero reaction to it.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't an issue.
Yeah.
Let me ask you something, Charles, because I want to kind of guide this to today's topic, and I think it has something to do with it, and just ask your opinion on something. Do you think this illusion that people have about the past, when these young people, and I'm not just talking about teenagers, but the 30s, 20s, and 30s categories, and these people who are leaving the church right now, they look back and they're seeing now exactly what you're talking about, regarding more or less, we're talking about the Christian histories that they thought they knew, and they're seeing that they're not quite as firm as they thought they were And do you think that that is leading to this exodus of Christians from their own religion?
Yes, I do, because when they get into college, or in some cases high school in some areas, they discover what they were taught at church does not match up with the written accounts. Like I said,
Exactly.
Right.
How many times do preachers talk about the Treaty of Tripoli?
Yeah,
well,
never.
I think even beyond that, though, as we said before, people tend to disperse, once they get out of school in the country. But you also have more people going to college, and some of these kids who might have been homeschooled for a large part of their school days are having to interact with other people in college and with professors and get an entirely different view on what the world is like than the view that they may have been brought up with.
Are you aware of the YouTuber Aaron Raw?
Yes, I've met him
Okay.
before, actually, yeah.
Oh, congratulations. I've been trying to, but I couldn't get off work.
Yeah, I got him in Houston in 2011. But
Stated flat out that the first 9 Muslims he ever met was at community college, I think it was, and it had absolutely nothing to do with all his preconceived notions of what a Muslim was.
right.
The 9th one, on the other hand, was. So that they mix and meet, and they find out that people have a wide spectrum of different ideas and so forth that they never ever get to hear about.
Right.
It's only when they get out away from the bubble that they've been living in.
Yeah.
It's a
They
wake-up
find out
call.
this.
And these people who are willing to leave the bubble, they're seeking knowledge. And I was warned not to investigate too deeply without assistance, not to read into things too much without some help.
To guide you, because you weren't up to the point where you could really understand without some guidance.
And my criticisms were always just brushed off. I mean, and some of them weren't even that bad, but you can't help but notice.
Yeah.
And I think that those people are especially susceptible, and for good reason, to criticize their own faith.
Okay, well, thank you for calling in, Charles. I think we're going to let you go now and give some other people a chance to call in here, if you don't mind.
No problem.
And
Bye-bye.
we'd like to have you call back anytime. Now, do we have some promos we could play now?
If you live in or around the Knoxville area and are questioning your religious beliefs or simply believe in one less God than everyone else, well, you're not alone. The Atheist Society of Knoxville is a fun and friendly group of people just like you that meets twice a week at a bar or restaurant. We meet every Tuesday night following the show at Barley's Tap Room and Pizzeria for happy hour. You'll find our group either inside or on the patio. Look for Richard Dawkins' silver-jacketed book, The God Delusion, standing upright on the table. On Fridays, we meet at Agave Azul or the Beard and Beer Market. But if you plan to preach, proselytize, provoke, or punch, please don't. We all question what we believe at one point in our lives. If this is the time for you, come join us for food, drink, conversation, and fun. If you live in or around, do you find stories of talking snakes laughable? Do you prefer the scientific method over supernatural beliefs? Are you concerned about religious leaders and organizations imposing their values and rules on your body, your family, and the rest of our society? Well, take comfort in the fact that you're not alone. The Rationalists of East Tennessee meets weekly for fellowship and provides a forum for people who support skeptical thinking and rational discussion of these and other issues. To find out more information or to find out about our next meeting, visit us on the web at www.rationalist.org.
Okay, well, here we are back at the show. We thank you for joining us if you're watching. Remember, it's a call-in show. Our number's up there on the screen. And we would really like to hear from you, particularly if you're somebody who has dropped out of church and would like to tell us your story why. That's what we're dealing with today.
Yep. And we just had a great call with Charles there.
Yeah.
And it looks like we might have another great call, so let's go ahead and take it.
Okay.
Yes, hello, caller. It's Freethought Forum. Could we have a nickname for you?
Boris.
One more time?
B-O-R-I-S.
Oh, Boris. Hello.
Hi. I'm enjoying the show and interested in the topic. You're talking about Easter and talking about why people become N-O-N-E-S.
Yeah, mainly the latter. We just happened to mention the Easter, but we're mainly interested in this, the Exodus from the church we're seeing.
Well, quickly, let me tell you something that I read today that deals with that topic.
Okay.
I just finished a book called Unorthodox, The Scandalous Rejection of My Hasidic Roots by Deborah Feldman. Now, very quickly, she was in the Satmar sect in Brooklyn. This is a strict Hasidic sect. And she says in her book how it provided her comfort and community, and that's something you were talking about. But she said as she began to read, in other words, felt the need for education, which is something else you talked about, she began to long for freedom. Freedom from restrictions, and especially freedom from fear,
right,
which I thought was kind of interesting. And I think that's kind of both the reason why people leave and the reason why people stay, fear. I think in my case, Easter was I finally realized a legend that tried to deal with our natural fear of death. We all have a fear of death, and Easter seems to be a solution to it. But what really turned me against religion, and then I'll stop, was that I found the most horrendous concept in religion, at least in Christianity, is the fear of hell, which is used to keep people in religion.
Right.
And as I became aware of that and thought of the consequences on children and also my own upbringing, how much afraid of hell I was, that frankly angered me, and now I consider myself free from that fear.
I agree with that 100%.
I think you make a very good point, and I agree with you that it's that fear that both repels people yet keeps them tied to the church. I know people who have had this horrible feeling of going to hell, as you say. And these are people, you know, they weren't young people. They're people in 40s or 50s, something like that. Mm-hmm. And they don't go to church necessarily, not very religious, but they seem to walk around with this fear that weighs on them a lot of times.
Even as a Christian, I would have dreams, and they were nightmares is what they were. And it was the end times, as you say, and everyone was zipped to heaven except for me, because I wasn't a good enough person, and well, not necessarily that, but because I was lacking somehow in my faith. And this was terrifying. And like you said, as soon as I began to realize how terrifying it was, I couldn't even fathom for years, and I don't even think I can now, how much that affects a person. You'd probably need quite a few years of school to even, and some real research to even know that. I mean, it's horrible. It's a terrible evil you're inflicting on people.
Right, and it's drummed into you that you can never be good enough.
Right,
You're absolutely never good enough.
You're held to the standard that cannot be maintained, which is of Jesus Christ, typically, right? And that you'll never be that. And furthermore, you're born with a bit of it you'll never get rid of, except for one other way. So,
Boris, did you belong to a regular mainline church?
Yes, Roman Catholic.
And you don't participate now, or do you still so?
No, I'm very curious about it, and I follow the news, but I don't participate. I think they're perpetuating this legend because it's tradition.
Right. I mean, it's not going to go away the way that they've brought it up. It's a central tenet almost. It's the stories are so woven together. And then, like Ralph was saying, as you find out where these things come from, and you realize you don't even know where a bunch of them came from, dissecting them really bothers people. That it's frustrating. You mean this ground that was so firm before collapses, and it's insanely firm while you're standing on it. But then once you dissect it, it just gives away, and it pulls other parts of your lives down too. So
yeah. So
well, if I may make one more point, and then I'll stop. I don't think we ever get over fear. I think that's probably ingrained in us instinctively from our evolution. It makes sense to me that we would evolve with a strong sense of fear. It has a protective faculty, you might say.
Yeah, in that sense, you're probably right.
So I don't think we'll ever get away from fear, but I think that education, reading, and in fact, Deborah Feldman, who wrote this book Unorthodox that I mentioned, she talks about the fear of being successful after she leaves her Hasidic community, how fearful that was.
yeah.
But she wanted to do it, in her case, for her young son. She wanted to do it, obviously, for herself. And she knew that education was going to help. Now, we know we're always going to have fear, and atheism does not provide a blanket of comfort. We're going to have our troubles, we're going to have our fears, but I would much rather live in a reality of, let's say, not knowing really how the Big Bang started, not knowing a lot of things, but I found after I became thoroughly atheistic that I really did have a feeling of freedom. I know my life is not going to last long. I know that death is at the end of it all, but I really have found more joy. It might be strange to some people, but I found more joy in exploring facts as they seem to be presented to me by science. So there is joy. There's still going to be fear. There's still going to be problems. But when you're faced with facts, I don't think the solution is to turn away from them.
Right.
Those are all great comments, Boris. This is really a great call-in for us.
Yeah.
Could I ask you a few questions before you leave?
Yes.
Have you watched us before?
Yeah, I watch pretty regularly.
Uh-huh. And how did you find us initially? Do you remember?
I think it was channel surfing.
Yeah, probably.
Oh, great.
So I think that's a lot of people. Well, thanks very much, Boris. You made some really terrific points, and we would like to have you call back anytime. Thanks a lot.
I probably will, but I'll try to make it shorter because I know other people.
We
are
enjoy
waiting.
it. Just to remind you, are you, if you're wait, are you local, or did you say?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, of course, we're having our get-together at Barley's tonight, and anyone's welcome to join. In fact, probably going on right now, and it'll be going. We're usually there at about 7.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been there. That's a great group.
Okay.
So thanks for letting me call in. You're doing a great job.
All right. Thanks.
Okay.
Eloquently put.
Yeah.
I mean, if and of course, Dawkins had the opportunity to say something about it in Charleston as well. You know, and I like Sagan, right? Is that the ability we are in a way for the universe to know itself, to understand itself, and it is really nice and comforting to believe in a God to an extent, and it's also discomforting if you question a lot. I was the questioner, but I could understand the comfort, but I could never go back.
It's comforting to people who, you know, want that big daddy that they think.
That's
is
what I
going
mean.
to take
Parental
care of them.
figure. This.
And you know, it's hard when you grow up and you're going through high school and you sort of suddenly realize you're going to leave home. You're not going to be there anymore, and so many people go off and but they can still cling to the idea of this big daddy in the sky who will
Yeah.
take care of them. And well, I won't say any more about that. But anyhow,
But
yeah.
this all ties in. A lot of what some of the callers were mentioning, this how the ground falls out from under you, how I kind of got there, to the people who are leaving the church, which is the topic today, and an article that's been sent to me by several people independently, not collaborating together.
Yeah.
Which is an apologetics or an apologist who's attempting to rationalize this as much as William Lane Craig was, if you've seen that episode. And the point is that people are getting smarter. They're asking the questions. The church does provide answers, but they're not satisfying. Just as the old answers of this flat Earth weren't satisfying at some point, the answers that they're hearing now aren't satisfying, and they're getting the answers from somewhere. Now, I think that's very insightful for a religious person to say, to actually examine and go, this is hurting us. But then he goes on to say that these questions have been answered, and that they've been answered over the centuries by like Thomas Aquinas and some other thinkers. I would argue that, yeah, they've been answered, but those are unsatisfactory as well. But he knows why that they're unanswered in the church, and that goes on to his other point that he made here, which is that Christians are ignorant. At least he's a Christian criticizing Christians, and just talking about what we've mentioned many times here. They don't read their own book. They don't know where it came from. I mean, these are extremely embarrassing facts, as determined by the Pew poll on religious study, and I believe it was 2011. Which followed, that was the study of this exodus of people from faith. They're just, they're not going to church. And, I mean, these things are critical.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I mentioned before on Bill O'Reilly's show, where he essentially didn't know what caused the tides. I mean, he thought God must have caused them to go in or not. He didn't have any idea that the sun and the moon caused the tides. I mean, that's just sort of basic stuff that you learn in junior high school science class, I think.
Yeah, I mean, let's grant him, let's do what I want, because I want to use some of Dawkins' words again. Let's grant him the, what was the concession that he used? I can't remember it. Okay, the Eddington concession, right? So let's grant Bill O'Reilly that he knows where the tides, that the moons pull, that gravity works, that there are currents and whatnot involved. But he still threw tides come in, tides come out, this expression, as if to say no one understood, as if to say that this knowledge was meaningless. And this is insulting to anyone who is trying to answer the question, what do tides do?
Right, and this brings up the point. A lot of people are ignorant. You can't fault people for being ignorant of something if they haven't learned it, etc. But there's a lot of willful ignorance. That is, people don't want to learn anything. If they want to believe that God put the moon out there and that there's an angel pushing it around, they're going to believe it. They won't want to go and read anything else that tells them something different. And that is a problem with the fundamental churches.
Yeah, and that would also be precisely my criticism of Mr. O'Reilly. This is willful ignorance, and it's almost malicious.
Yeah.
I really don't know that, but I'm thinking it is. Let's see. Some of the other. Actually, you had some stats on. 1 in 5 Americans is estimated to be an atheist.
Yeah, for all the reasons that are given for why people leave the church, it seems to be that whether they admit it or not, that more people than ever are coming to the real belief that God just doesn't exist. And I've seen, and although maybe there's only a few percent of people who claim that they're atheists or who are agnostics, I've seen estimates as high as 1 in 5 people are really functionally atheist or agnostic because they don't go to church, they don't pay much attention to religion at all, but they're just not quite willing to bring themselves to the point where they say, well, they're atheistic or agnostic.
Right.
And I think that's mostly because they don't think about it that much. It just isn't part of their lives.
I know that, some friends that I have, functional atheists, at the mention of the word atheist, they make that face, like, ugh. And this can only be explained by propaganda, by tainting the word.
Right.
What exactly is wrong with being an atheist? And when you think about it, I mean, we use the word all the time on the show. We got it right there because it pulls in viewers. But honestly, why should we? It's just a word. It's as same as theist. It's just saying no theist, not non-theist.
Yeah.
But yet it has this huge impact on so many people. And the only explanation I think that is rational is the way that it's been butchered over the years.
As people like George Lakoff, people who are cognitive scientists put it, every word is not just a word by itself. Every word carries a whole lot of baggage with it. It carries a whole frame of reference with it. And as you say, over the years, the frame that's been built up around it is, well, atheists are immoral. That's the one thing you hear all the time. You can't have morality without a God. Or, well, these atheists just want to spoil things for everybody else or something.
Right.
So there's always a negative connotation that is the cloud surrounding the word.
And yeah, it is used to do what's called poisoning the well.
Yeah.
Which I think I heard, the first person I heard say this was P.Z. Myers, who's a biologist, who was, I believe he was going around talking to religious people, but he was talking about evolution. And basically when he was introduced, they would say, this is P.Z. Myers, the atheist. Now, what does that have to do with it? It simply has nothing to do with it.
Right.
The point was to poison the well so that he could, so that the people viewing would know to ignore what he's saying.
Right.
I mean, what's that for?
We have another call.
We're going to take one more call. Hello, caller. This is Freethought Forum. Just to let you know, we're coming towards the end of the show, but we got a few minutes to talk to you. Could we have a nickname for you?
George.
One more time.
George.
George. Hello, George.
Yeah, it says God is dead. No one cares.
Yeah, that's a topic from last show, and we're curving that to why are people leaving the church? I mean, it seems like they just don't care to go anymore.
Oh.
Would you?
I thought if you were atheist, then God couldn't be dead because he didn't exist in the first place.
That's true for atheists, but this is a metaphorical sense of dead. The idea is to say that with the multitude of people that we see leaving the church, the rise of criticism of religion, what's the issue? Do they not care anymore? And if so, why?
I thought you were all talking against the Bible.
Oh, well, I mean, I'm very critical of the Bible, but we're asking believers, we're asking mainly the Christians around the area, why are young people, not children, but 20-year-old, 30-year-olds, older than that, but basically the younger crowd, why are they not attending church anymore? And do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, if you don't go to church, you go to hell.
Well, I mean,
that's
as soon as I hear that, I think to myself, I ain't going to your church, man. That's worse than threatening someone with death.
I think that's the message that the churches put out that are causing a lot of younger people to quit going to church.
Yeah.
Because they find it just terribly oppressive message.
And they don't believe it. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, why should they believe that?
Everybody's believed it for 100,000 years, so...
Christianity's been around for 100,000 years?
Well, it's been around for a while.
All right, so it's been around for...
2,000 years.
2,000. Let's give it 2,000. We'll start there. But, I mean...
But not everybody always believed that. It was the higher ups in the church that convinced people that was true. It's a matter of crowd control, of population control. You generate fear in their minds, as one of our previous callers said.
Yeah.
And if you can get that fear instilled, why, then they will stick with the church. But younger people are starting to get pretty bright. They get out in the world, they're better educated, and they just don't believe those old fairy tales.
Well, I blame evolution.
All right.
That's why people don't believe in the fairy tales.
I'm not sure about that. I mean, there are lots of people, even fairly often cited scientists, that have said that they still maintain their religious beliefs. And we're talking about evolutionary scientists. Was it Stephen Jay Gould? No, Stephen Jay Gould wasn't a Christian, but he capitulated to say that evolution would not interfere with that.
Yeah,
on some grounds, I might disagree, but
there are a lot of.
The only reason I called in is because it said atheism, God is dead, and I figure if you're an atheist, and God wasn't around in the first place, and I'm sorry that I get you off subject.
Well, it's slightly on subject, I think.
I think that's a good point to make. But what we're really saying is that God was an idea. It's not
well, if you
was
going to say God was an idea, then you should put up there God was an idea, not God is dead.
Well, we only have so much space, actually.
Sometimes we have to use some metaphors to get in there.
Yeah,
I mean,
idea and dead has the same number of letters.
No.
God is idea.
God.
I mean, I might try that one time. I don't know. But I think we're about to have to let you go. But I appreciate your call, and I think you still hit some things that are on point. If you don't go to church, you're going to hell. Why am I going to hell? And then when I research it and I find out that your God's an anthropomorphic creation. I'm not going. I'm like, sweet. I'm not going to hell anymore because that's crazy. It's just a myth.
Well, I tell you what, it's anthropomorphic. I'm going to get me a dictionary.
That's man-made. That's all that means. I didn't mean to. That's a study of. It's just man-made religion, basically. We manufactured it to explain primitive concepts of the world.
But don't let that discourage you from getting the dictionary.
Absolutely not. Yeah. But we're going to let you go now.
Yeah.
We appreciate the call.
Thanks very much for calling in.
All right.
So we didn't get to cover all these points here.
I think we wrapped it to those two main points, though. I mean, people are getting smarter, and honestly, it's not just it's everyone. Christians are getting smarter.
Yeah.
And they're just not reading their Bibles anymore because they just. I mean, why read it? Why not read, this book on biology to find out where we came from? So
yeah, absolutely.
And that's how they're maintaining the two beliefs kind of at the same time.
And of course it goes slow, but now I don't have a lot to say here. I just point out that as far as people leaving church, in 1965, 65% of Catholics attended weekly Mass. Now it's 25%, and most of those 25% are 50 or older.
Yep.
So that's going down to 10% in a few years. Well, we have to wrap up now. We only have about a minute to go, so get out your pen and paper here.
This has been Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalist of East Tennessee.
And please send us your feedback. You can leave voicemail at 865-272-9060. or email us at freethoughtforum@yahoo.com.
You can see this show most Tuesdays from 5 to 6 p.m.
And we want to give our thanks to Sam and Jonas for technical assistance and help, and to the staff at CTV Knox, and to all our callers. We had a great set of callers today.